Okay. Okay, so we have calculated, we all agreed that the median of the data was 60.5. And that data point would be right here. And that is the middle data there. So now we know there are 16 data points here, and there are 16 data points here. Does that make sense to everybody? That we have 16 data points between 52 and 60.5. And we have 16 data points between 60.5 and 65, which is our upper range limit. Give me a thumbs up if that makes sense so far. Okay. Yeah, great. Okay, so I'm also going to put a line above my dot plot at the lower range limit, which is 52. And I'm going to put a line above my dot plot on the upper range limit, which is 65. I'll try to get them all in a single line. There we go. So we know that between our median and 52, that 50% of our data is there. And so to calculate box and whisker plot, we are going to split, right now we have our data split in half, right? We have our lower range point, we have our median, that's 50% of our data. And we have our median and our upper range limit, which is the other 50% of our data points. And so to calculate and draw a box and whisker plot, we need to split our data into what is called quartiles. So we're gonna, and a quartile is a quarter of the data. So what we need to calculate is the median of the lower half of the data, which is between the lower range and the median. So if we know there are 16 data points between 52 and our median, what would be the median number in that data? What's the middle of 16?
8.
8. Yeah, right, 8, right? So if we, when we're using our dot plot, we can count out 8 points from the bottom or the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then from the top down, we can do the same. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And these are our 8th and 9th points. So that would be like 8 are here, 8 are here, and then our median is in between those two, but they're the same number, right? These are the same number. We know that from our dot plot. They're both number 58, which means our median of our lower 50% of our data is 58. So I'm going to put a line up above where the 58 is. And I'm going to call this line Q1 for quarter 1 because it is splitting my data now. Here is 25% of my data points. And here are 25% of my data points. And my median, we're going to now call Q2 because it splits my data in half. And if I think of it like money, it's like 2 quarters, right? Like 25 cents or 25% is Q1 at Q1. 25% more is at Q2. And so now I'm going to do the same thing for the upper half of my data. So I'm going to go from 60.5 to 65. And again, how far am I counting to get the median of this? If we know there are 16 points here, what am I going to count again? One of you tell me. How many data points am I going to count?
8.
8, right, same. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I get 61. And if I count 8 from the top down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So unlike the first quartile, this number is going to be between 61 and 62. And what number is between 61 and 62?
61.5.
Right, 61.5, exactly. So I'm going to put 61.5 down on the bottom, and then I'm going to put a line up at the top here and call that Q here, Q3. And then our upper range limit, 65, is actually Q4. So now we've split our data into 4 quartiles. So we have 25, 50, we have another 25% here, and we have another 25% here. And what this means is that 25% of our students are between 52 inches and 58 inches tall. Another 25% of our students are between 58 and 60.5. Another 25 are between 60.5 and 61.5. And the last 25% of our students are between 61.5 and 65. So now I can create my box and whisker plot. And the box of the box and whisker plot is the central tendency. So it's the central 50% of the data. So I use my lines, and I'm going to create a box between Q1 and Q3 with the median Q2 represented in the box. I would say in the center, but it's not necessarily the actual center. So I'm going to put a box between Q1 and Q3. Like this. And my median is here. So I can see my median is actually skewed this way a little bit. It's not in the center of the box. And this represents half of our class. Half of our class is between 58 inches tall and 61.5 inches tall. And there is my box for the box and whisker plot. The whiskers tell me what the extreme values and the lower on 25% and the upper 25% of our data is. So I use that lower range number, and I make a line from the box to the lower range number, like this. And then put a dot at the end. And I do the same for the upper range. So I go from Q3 to Q4, and I put a dot at Q4. And that is my, those are my whiskers. And so what this tells me, when I look at it, so a box and whisker plot allows me to visualize my data without all this mess down here, right? I don't have to see all these dots. It's telling me the tendencies of my data. And so the bigger my box is, the wider the range is for the central 50% of the data. And the further away the whiskers are from the box, tells me like this, one of our students, so most of our students are between 58, or half of our students are between 58 and 61.5 inches tall. But we have one really short student at 52 inches. And we have one taller student who's actually Dr. Ogden, who's 65 inches. So we can see that like this line is longer than this line.